Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Since India was taken over by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party since 2014, the authorities over there have not only been found involved in the brutal discrimination against the minorities, but also its agencies have been found involved in state sponsorship of terrorism. This particular phenomenon, which is being perpetrated by the Indian authorities with impunity, back-to-back startling revelations regarding this phenomenon of Indian authorities involved in state sponsorship of terrorism. Earlier, Pakistan had been trying to draw the international community's attention towards this state sponsorship of terrorism by India. Now, the case of Indian Navy's commander Kulbhushan Yadav, who was caught red-handed in various espionage, sabotage and terror activities in Pakistan, is a classical example of this particular state sponsorship of terrorism by India on a sovereign country's soil. Recently, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on the floor of the parliament told that the Indian government agents were involved in the killing of a Canadian Sikh, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on the Canadian soil, which was of course reacted to by the Indian side very strongly, saying these allegations were absurd. However, we saw the United States authorities urging the Indian authorities to cooperate with the Canadian authorities in the investigation of this particular murder and bring the perpetrators to book and hold them accountable. Also, in another major development, a Qatari court had awarded death sentence to 8 former Indian Navy officials who were found involved in espionage activities. Now, a Financial Times report has revealed that the US authorities have thwarted a conspiracy to assassinate a Sikh Canadian American national, Gurpat Want Singh Pannu, on American soil. The National Security Council has confirmed the Financial Times report, saying that the US had raised the issue with India, including at the senior most levels. Also, National Security Council spokesperson Adrienne Watson says, let me quote her, that we have conveyed our expectation that anyone deemed responsible should be held accountable. And what sort of a reaction has come from the Indian External Affairs Ministry? Let me bring that one also, that the US side shared some inputs pertaining to the nexus between organized criminals, gun runners, terrorists and others. The inputs are a cause of concern for both the countries, and they decided to take necessary follow-up action, adding that the issues were already being examined by the relevant departments. Now, this sort of a response by the Indian authorities regarding this particular startling revelation that has been made by a Financial Times report, which has also been confirmed by the National Security Council, will bring in the panelists in order to understand is this particular response by the Indian authorities in this case similar to that response to what they had when it came to the Canadian case, or is it different, or is it similar? And what basically India is up to through these nefarious designs, what sort of goals Indian authorities want to achieve? And these back-to-back startling revelations, shouldn't these serve as an eye-opener, especially for the Western nations who talk high of India being a trusted and a reliable partner? Let me quickly bring in our panelists. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Naveed Aman Khan. He is senior analyst. And Mr. Naveed, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype at the same time, we are being joined by Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan, former president of the National Defense University. General Raza, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Now, let me begin the discussion with you, General Raza. Mr. Aman, if you allow me, let me begin it with General Raza. General Raza, by these Financial Times revelations now, back-to-back revelations, firstly, we saw a classical case of state sponsorship of terrorism, in the case of Kulbhushan Yadav, who was convicted here in Pakistan. Later on, the two countries contested that case at the International Court of Justice. A couple of months before, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came up with the startling revelations regarding the murder of Canadian Sikh leader on the Canadian soil. Now, this particular startling revelation by the Financial Times, which has been confirmed by the National Security Council. What's your understanding? What is India up to, and what does it want to achieve through these acts?
Okay, Bismillah. I think it is very clear that the Modi regime is implementing a political agenda through all these international terrorism that you talked about in Pakistan, in Qatar, in Canada, and now attempts in the United States for the purpose of telling their people in the Indian general elections, which are due in April next year, that they are the so-called quote unquote chowkidars of India, the mantra which they repeated in 2019 also, just before those elections, in February, they managed a false flag operation in Pulwama, and then they attacked Balakot. Then also the purpose was to win the elections, and now again that is the purpose. Right now, I think the BJP has lost provincial level or state level elections in at least 6 to 7 states, and they have nothing new or nothing tangible or substantial to offer to the people of India to elect them again. Therefore, they are actually flogging a dead horse and calling Muslims, particularly Kashmiris and Sikhs, as terrorists. What they are not understanding is that they are alienating a very large segment of their population, which is 200 million Muslims and about 30 million Sikhs all over the world. And I think with these actions, this is ample proof for the Financial Action Task Force Board of Governors take a note and put India on the blacklist. Uh, and I think what the United States government is asking India, uh, I think Indians will not respond to them according to their expectations, as we saw in the case of Canada, uh, unless there is punishment awarded to all those who are involved, as it was done by Qatar to their ex-naval officers. So I think what India is doing is really in the political interest of the BJP government, but it is not in the long-term security of India to now pick up a row internationally with the United States or Canada, who are members of NATO, or with its close partner, Qatar, and alienating, the Muslims, because there the Qataris have been saying that their spies were working for Israel. And we know the agenda why they were working for Israel, because of the very close relationship, particularly defense and security relationship of Israel with India. So we hope, that the international community will take notice and India will be censored, at least, as I said earlier, to the FATF and to the UN Security Council for violating the many resolutions on the sponsorship of international terrorism.
Right, General Raza, you have highlighted very important, pertinent points. I'll come back to you for your detailed view regarding those one by one. Let me proceed towards Mr. Naveed. Mr. Naveed, now, how embarrassing do you think it happens to be for a nation or a state that boasts itself to be the largest democracy in the world on one hand, but on practical grounds, we see it is not only involved in brutal discrimination towards minorities, but also its state sponsorship of terrorism is also directed towards them.
And Jawad, the most important thing to understand, first of all, is the mythology of the Indian government or BJP or Modi. The myth is Hindutva based. They believe that in India is not India, it is Hindustan, and a country for the Hindus, not for any minority like Muslims, the Christians, or the Sikhs, or the Buddhists. Whosoever lives in India, they don't believe that that land is for them as well to live in that country peacefully as an Indian. They believe that Hindu is the only community or a nation who is Indian, and all those who are living in India, they are not Indians, number one. Number two, this is a hatred based and rejection based mythology of Modi and BJP, number one. Number two is Sikhs are struggling for their homeland, and that is Khalistan. They have been struggling since long for the independence of Khalistan, or they are demanding for that homeland for themselves. Not only those who live in India, but also those Sikhs living in America, in Canada, in Great Britain, and in any part of the world, they are all supporters of those Sikhs who are struggling for their homeland, separate homeland, which is Khalistan. Those who are living in Canada, they are Canadians. But in India believes, or the Modi believes, that those Sikhs living in Canada or America, they are not Canadian and American, they are Indians. They are not Indians, they are Canadian and Americans. India has nothing to do or to pressurize those Canadian or American nationals or any other country's nationals in such a way. This also gives an impression to those who are struggling for their independence, like the Kashmiris who are struggling for their independence. If they kill Canadian in Canada or American in America, the Sikhs, it means they are giving some gesture or impression to those Muslims struggling for their independence from India in Kashmir. So the Canadian government, the American government has taken that action against India for the lives and security of their nationals, and this is their right to take that action. As far as the role of India in Pakistan is concerned regarding terrorism, Kulbhushan Yadav's case is, as you have earlier mentioned, that it is a classical case for the entire world to just go through and to study it. What the role of Kulbhushan Yadav has been in Pakistan when he was red-handed arrested in Pakistan. He was involved in different level of terrorist activities in Pakistan, and he was proven, he was charged, and he is in custody of Pakistan because he was involved. And as those who were involved in Qatar, those who have been involved in Pakistan, all are in the light.
Okay, Mr. Naveed, one thing that you already mentioned, when we talk about Indian authorities' approach towards the minorities at large within India on its own territory, presumably for a moment we can consider that they've got the authority over there, they can treat the people the way they want. So when we talk about those minorities who are living abroad in some other country, especially when we talk about the Western nations, how can India go about treating those minorities who are not on the Indian territory with the same yardstick and with impunity, without any fear of any sort of accountability? They continue to kill those people in the countries abroad.
Jawad, now the time has come that the Canadian government need to take that serious action against the killing of that Sikh leader in Canada. The incident which is noticed in America recently, the case in Pakistan regarding Kulbhushan Yadav, and those 8 Indians who were captured or sentenced to death in Qatar. All these countries need to now materialize their decisions and take actions against them.
Right. Let me proceed once again to General Raza. General Raza, what do you think has emboldened India, presumably just a nick of a second, we can understand the way the authorities are treating the minorities on its own territory within India, the way they want to do it, ever since, and there are multiple international reports of the most of the credible international organizations pointing this particular brutal discrimination towards minorities on its own territory. But what has emboldened India authorities to going for such acts with so much impunity on the territory of some other sovereign nations, particularly the Western nations in this particular case?
I think maybe there are two drivers of this kind of an approach, and the first one is that we are all aware that I think the United States in particular considers India as a bulwark against China, and it wants to use or misuse India to contain China. That is one. And the other one is that is evident from the Indian reactions in the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly on what is happening in the Middle East. I think it is trying to keep Israel very happy. And we are aware, that if Israel is kept happy, the United States is happy. And I think both these things have encouraged India to take all these kinds of actions, which is, as I said again, for its political advantage. But coming back, to this Khalistan referendum, I think this referendum has been successfully conducted since 2020 in Canada, in UK, in Italy, in Switzerland, in Australia, and on 28th of February next year, this is going to happen in the United States. And India, according to Mr. Panum, is trying its best to prevent this from happening. And if it succeeds in preventing this, again, India will be able to tell its voters, particularly the RSS and the VHP and other terrorists, that they have added to the security of India. Although by doing that, I think, as I said earlier, they have alienated a very large segment of their population. Also, I would like to, throw some light on really what are the grievances of the Sikh community. In 1947, Sikhs were a part of the trilateral dialogue with the British government between among Pakistan, Hindus, and the Sikhs. And Sikhs wanted an independent state for them. But Nehru at that time deceived them. And he told them that if it stays with India, then it will eventually give it independence. It never did so. Till 1966, I think the Indian Punjab also comprised the states of the present states of Haryana, of sub-districts of Rajasthan, the UP, and also Himachal Pradesh. And now in the new map of Khalistan, all these states have been included, and they're asking for a referendum through the diaspora. This is an absolutely legal measure that they have adopted. Thereafter, we are aware that the six grievances uh, actually exponentially increased in 1984 when Operation Blue Star was launched and the Akal Takht in the Golden Temple was destroyed by the Indian army. And Akal Takht is like Mecca and Medina for Muslims. I think in that 292 pilgrims were mercilessly killed and another 5,000 civilians were murdered. Subsequent to that, Indira Gandhi was assassinated. And as a backlash of that, 3,000 Sikhs were murdered in Delhi alone, and between 8,000 and 17,000 Sikhs were also murdered. 50,000 were displaced. After that, 2,000 Punjab policemen who refused to actually follow the orders to attack the Golden Temple, they were also killed and their bodies they were burnt. So it is all that, that has convinced the Sikhs to ask for an independent state. And I want to here quote the Indian opposition leader in the current Punjab Assembly, who stated that the Sikh referendum is a result of consistent policy of bias, discrimination, and persecution towards Sikhs by successive Indian government. So I think the Indian government and the international community needs to understand that these policies of India is going to not only make India insecure, but I think they should actually consider India as a liability rather than an asset to protect, their security concerns.
Right, Mr. Naveed. Now, when we talk about, as General has mentioned, it is India that wants to keep Israel happy as well as the United States. But looking at this particular instance of its plot of assassinating a leader over there on the American soil, do you think India is playing with fire and it would be able to keep its allies who actually talk very high of India itself happy?
No, I don't think. Jawad, India is also actually playing with fire. As far as this case is concerned in America, yes, America will never be happy with India on such behavior because America cannot afford it, whether be India against Sikhs in America. Number two is this, if we just have a psychological analysis of Modi or his politics, we need to go a bit back in Gujarat. He won the elections of Gujarat by butchering thousands of the Muslims in Gujarat. And he promoted that hatred against the Muslims. He provoked that sentiment in Hindus. So he believed that Hindustan or India is for Hindus, not for Muslims. Now he is again appearing in elections in 2024.
Okay, so there was one instance of the false flag operations when he was about to contest the 2014 elections. Also, later on, we have seen back-to-back false operations, and they have tried to point the fingers towards Pakistan. Now, that is a pattern that we
now
see
he's
quite
also following that pattern again because
okay,
he's
so
going to
at that particular time, the thing which I want to understand is that at that particular time, when it was not digital age, now everything is available to everybody on the tips of his fingers, just right away. And one can segregate what the reality is and what falsehood is. Okay, so provoking that very sentiment among Hindus, we have seen the kind of state legislative elections results that we just said. As the General has also mentioned, the BJP has lost in 5 to 6 or 7 states also, particularly when we talk about Karnataka, it has had a very humiliating defeat also there. Now, the Congress said it was because of this particular provocation on the part of the Bharatiya Janata Party leaders that it lost its base among the voters in Karnataka in particular. So do you think if this sentiment was sold well by the BJP leaders in the past, would they be able to sell it this time around just prior to the 2024 elections?
I think yes, it is because all of the political parties, whether it be Congress or BJP, all they, as far as the terrorism is concerned, their behavior towards Hinduism is concerned, or their behavior towards Pakistan is concerned, that behavior is the same. So they will follow whether BJP or Congress. They will try their best to go for such behavior or such treatment or such attitude in the elections. They are successful or not, but they will do it. One thing is very important for to understand now. Now in 2024, again, Modi is going for the elections because he is habitual of provoking hatred and that sort of mentality around elections. Now elections are very near. He is once again provoking the things against the Muslims, the Sikhs, these Christians in India.
You're of the view
he's
that
giving
perhaps he
impression.
is going to encash
Yes,
that particular provocation
yes,
and the sentiment.
he is giving that impression towards the Hindus of India that I am for you and nobody is here to live
Hindus
in
at
India.
large don't seem to understand the repercussions of this particular provocation.
It will be very fatal for India.
Okay, General Raza, do you think this time around, this particular provocation of the sentiments among the larger segment of the Hindus over there in India, it's going to sell as it has been sold in the past by Bharatiya Janata Party and Narendra Modi?
You see, I think a few years back, Modi appeared on the cover of the Time magazine, and there was an article written on that, and that title cover read "The Divider in Chief of India," because he believes, in the strategy of divide and rule, and he knows, that uh, if he's blaming all the minorities of India, and he's telling them that he is putting them in their proper place. So he is actually, appealing to the sentiments of his vote bank, which is the Hindutva lovers, and they are in a majority. So he doesn't mind, treating his minorities in any way, which can actually be called cruel or unwarranted. And unfortunately, the Indian opposition is also very divided. And I think unless all the minorities of India, and let me tell you that if you include in them the Dalits, who are again 230 millions, who the Hindus consider, as a sect of Hinduism, but they're not. They are not even allowed, to use the present Indian mandirs for prayers. They're considered untouchables. So I think if you count all of them, I think more than half the Indian population or the minorities need to actually get on a political platform together uh, in the opposition, and that is the only way, probably, to beat the BJP. I see no other way for them, for their
General
salvation.
Raza, what are the chances? In the recent past, we have seen there was a formation of alliance of around 24 to 26 opposition parties to go into the polls and defeat Bharatiya Janata Party. What sort of a chance do you think that particular alliance, the India alliance, stands in the general elections ahead?
I think right now it may be a little premature to give some kind of a prediction on that. But I think if these the minority populations actually join their hands for their own sake, I think they can bring down Modi first in the state elections and later on, I think also in the general election. In this, I'd like to add another quote by Mr. Khushwant Singh, from his book. It is titled "The End of India," and he's actually talking of the treatment being meted out to the minorities, and he says, I quote, "Unless a miracle
Right,
saves us."
right, General Raza, I'll come back to you to take your detailed view about this particular book titled The End of India, for the detailed view of you on this particular thing. Let me once again proceed to Mr. Naveed. Mr. Naveed, when we talk about the general elections, they're pretty much around the corner in India. Likewise, presidential elections in the United States are also going to be held the very next year, the same year. Of course, this particular instance of this assassination plot, naturally there would be a kind of a pressure on the Biden administration, how they basically deal with the situation as far as their relationship with India is concerned. A lot of expectations on the part of the voters towards the Biden administration's approach towards this issue would be there. How do you think it might likely impact about the performance of the Biden administration in the next general presidential
Definitely,
elections?
Jawad. This situation has embarrassed Biden as well, the America, and India in America, in India as well. because it is exposed. And it is now witnessed that it is clear now that India was trying to assassinate those 6 leaders in America. So it's not based on any sort of assumption. It is proved. Yes, Biden will definitely be under pressure if Biden continues such sort of solidarity or any attitude of well-being with India, especially Modi. He will be under pressure from the Americans in those elections in 2024. This has really embarrassed both of the countries in both of the countries. And Modi is the one who can create any sort of embarrassment elsewhere for India and for the Indian nation in the entire world, as he is embarrassing India in Pakistan by supporting TTP against Pakistan. No, at this stage, when we, as a peaceful nation, we are struggling for having peace in the region, and we are ready to extend our peace hand towards any nation of the world, especially the neighbors. India is now exploiting and doing or going in the otherwise direction, which will really spoil the peace of this region. As India, in case of Palestine, as India very clearly stands in favor of Israel, just to give impression to the Kashmiris that we will stand with the oppressors, we will stand with the brutals, not with those innocents of Palestine, and not with you in Kashmir.
As India continues to, carry out its high-handedness, the gross human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Also, now, General Raza, earlier in your take said it is not expected that India might give a response to the US administration regarding this assassination plot as expected by the United States administration. Now, as we all know, the presidential elections in the United States are also going to be held in the same year when there is going to be a general election in India. If the expected response from the Indian authorities doesn't come forth, what sort of an impact it might have on the popularity and the performance in the presidential elections when it comes to President Joe Biden and his team?
Well, I think the opposite of what is expected by Modi. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead, loud and clear. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
So obviously, Biden will be seen as a weak leader who cannot protect the citizens of the United States. And in this case, because Mr. Panun has a citizenship both of the United States as well as Canada, and he will also be accepting, terrorist attacks inside the United States. And I think he should be comparing it with what happens, in some ways in 9/11, where, people went and attacked the World Trade Center. So I think that kind of a response may not be there. It may not be there, and probably there may be some rapprochement between India and between the United States for what they call their bigger aims. There may be some rapprochement,
So, do
but
you
I
think
think
in that
that
case of a rapprochement, it would set a very good precedent for other nations around the world, particularly when it comes to the allies of the United States?
absolutely, absolutely. I think once that kind of precedence is retained, that is what Israel has also been doing. It has been attacking, many countries in the Middle East with impunity, and it had no fear of the UN Security Council or General Assembly because the United States was backing it. So it will be a very bad precedence, I think, and all such acts should be condemned by the people of the United States and also, I think, the world in general. And I was actually trying to quote what the Indian author said, and he says, unless a miracle saves India, it will break up, and it will not be by anyone from the outside, by anyone from inside or outside. It will be both, and that way India may actually commit a harakiri. So right now, the treatment of the minorities and now the international criminal acts is actually India is going towards committing suicide uh, only for giving political advantage to its present leaders, and that I think is very foolhardy.
Right. Keeping aside for a moment the kind of approach the major world powers could take towards these instances in which there is a clear-cut and irrefutable evidence of India's involvement of state sponsorship of terrorism with such an impunity. What happens to be the responsibility when we talk about the international organizations? Of course, these major world powers happen to be the member of those organizations, but the mandate of which, the goal and the objective of which happen to be ensuring the security, and the prime of which is the United Nations Security Council. When a nation or a state is found involved in such type of subversive activities, what happens to be their responsibility? How can United Nations Security Council collectively hold such a state accountable for it?
Well, I think when it comes to the UN Security Council, I think all these countries who are now the victims, and we have named, Pakistan, we have named Qatar, and I think the Canadian and the US governments and others where such terrorist attacks have been launched. Uh, I think one is not sure about the governments of the US or the Canada, but I think all other countries should collectively make an effort that this issue is taken at the highest level, at the UN Security Council and even at the General Assembly. And I think it will be the people of Canada and the people of the United States and all those minorities, the Sikh diaspora, supported by the Pakistani, the Kashmiri diaspora, and in general, the Muslim diaspora, who are now utterly disappointed with the Indian stance in Palestine. All those countries, I think, need to have a collective efforts. They need to build a collective effort and a consensus to take this to the UN Security Council and to take it up at the highest level with the political leadership of Canada and of the United States and all other permanent members of the UN Security Council. They need to actually make them more aware, and I think they need to take part in political rallies and also publishing articles about all this, what is happening. And I think that would pressurize, I think, the permanent members of the UN Security Council to take action against India so that it can prevent it from repeating these actions not only in other countries but also in Pakistan. Look, I think uh, if all these things what the Indians have now doing internationally, if they backfire, then I think there is a very strong possibility that they again, resort to some false flag operations against Pakistan. But they should know the response of Pakistan. They should not forget that uh, the swift retort of the PF, and they should not forget, the good cup of tea that we offered to Abhinandan. So I hope they keep that in mind and they do not repeat what they did in February of 2019.
Point well taken, General Raza. Mr. Naveed, what is required to shake the conscience of the United Nations Security Council, in particular, or at least taking this matter up with the United Nations General Assembly, where a resolution of such a sort could be adopted, that under the Modi regime in particular, the world's largest democracy has turned into a state sponsor of terrorism?
So one thing is very important. Pakistan has long been suffering and facing terrorism in Pakistan. More than 2 decades have gone that Pakistan has been suffering, and that terrorism has been sponsored by India in Pakistan. So that Pakistan has been suffering that state-sponsored terrorism in Pakistan. When Pakistan has been protesting against India's involvement in Pakistan and registering its protest in UN and in America or in different parts of the world, the international community or UN has never been taking those concerns seriously. Now, when India is involved in Canada terrorism, India is involved in America, that sort of terrorism. India is involved in Qatar in that sort of spy activities. It has exposed India, and it has just certified that Pakistan has always been true and right in this case. Now,
Vindication of Pakistan's long held.
Now, America, Canada, Qatar, Great Britain, and the different parts of the different countries of the world or UN need to take action against India because of certification of those incidents which has happened in those countries and which has certified that Pakistan has always been true and rightful in raising its voice against Indian terrorism in Pakistan. So what is being done in Pakistan is very serious Indian state-sponsored terrorism. I think this is the high time to raise this voice by America or UN or Canada, Pakistan, and Qatar collectively against India, so that India should not cross its limits in different parts of the world.
Right. So, General Raza, when you talk about in the historical perspective, this Hindutva ideology, the kind of policies and the approach driven on the basis of that Hindutva ideology that has been spearheaded by Bharatiya Janata Party ever since in 2014 they took power, we have seen lots on their shoulders. Has India been always like that, or what was that turning point when India actually turned towards this extremist ideology away from the Nehruvian or Gandhian ideologies, and what are the core differences between those ideologies?
Well, I think you can take it back to 1947-48 when the RSS murdered Mahatma Gandhi. And one of the reasons which they gave was that Mahatma Gandhi should not have agreed to the partition of India. And the other reason which they gave was that, there were about 70 crore rupees which the State Bank of India was to give to Pakistan as their share of financial assets. Out of that, it gave a very small amount, I think about 20 crores or so. And they held the rest of the money. And I think Mahatma Gandhi said that, there was a promise made. It was an obligation, international commitment, and therefore we need to give them back those money. And I think Nehru, he was forced to give that money. And they started hating Gandhi and murdered him. And I think that murderer of Gandhi, he is now taken as a hero by the BJP. And subsequently, I think this went on. India constitutionally, de jure, it is a secular country. But de facto, I think it is a very extremist, religious, bigoted state. And I think the world needs to understand that that is something for worst which has happened in India. And I think the people of India need to realize this.
What a pertinent way to sum it up, General Raza, that as DJO, it happens to be a secular democracy, but as a de facto, it is an extremist entity that has been time and again found involved in state sponsorship of terrorism, the kind of brutal discrimination it metes out towards its minorities at large. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan, former president of National Defense University, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. And in the studio, we were joined by Mr. Naveed Aman Khan, senior analyst. Mr. Naveed, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.